Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 45.
All right, Ben, episode 45. I did my research this time. And I realized that when I do this, a lot of the times it's about math and the actual number of the episode that we're talking about. And I realize I'm getting some feedback. People don't really like that. Well, too bad. I'm an accountant and this is what we're doing. So buckle up.
Give me some numbers.
All right, so 45. 45 is a weirdly symmetric number. Like, it has this beautiful unfolding quality. I want to go through just a couple of versions of it. For example, 45 is half of 90. 90 is a right angle, which is great, and it's an eighth of 360 degrees.
So far, so
it
good.
just fits perfectly into everything. It's palindromic in so many ways.
Not.
Like in base 2, in binary, it is 101101, which is a palindrome, forward and backwards. In base 8, it is 55. Forwards and backwards.
Palindrome?
In base 14, it's 33.
Why are we talking about base 14?
All right, so 45, the preceding prime number of 45 is 43, which is 2 less than 45. The next prime number is 47, 2 more than 45. Symmetry again. If you add 45 to its reverse, which is 54, you get another palindrome. It's 99. 45 plus 54 is 99 palindrome. Perfect. The product of its digits, 4 times 5 is 20. If you subtract the product from 45, you get a square. 45 minus 20 is 25, which is 5 squared. If you multiply it by the product, it's squared again. 45 times 20 is 900, which is 30 squared. Then, no matter how you unfold it, 45 is symmetrical.
Well, 45 is a great number, and this is going to be a great episode of Bad at Magic.
Well, whoa. First of all, spoilers. And, dude, let's set that bar a little lower.
All right. Well, there's a couple things I want to do. One is I want to kind of give a summary of my time in Florida. Anybody that's
right. Yes, because you're home now. You sound a little bit different. You probably sound a little bit better on your good microphone.
This is the first time I'm back home, back in my studio, I guess you could say, ready to take on the world being back home. So my time in Florida, so 6 months ago, I left for Florida to be an augmentee on the headquarters staff at United States CENTCOM rear headquarters at MacDill Air Force Base, Florida. I never really talked about my job there, but every staff has a headquarters that's divided up functionally. Anyone that's in the military knows this. I had a good friend, a common friend of ours, that gave me an acronym for it, a mnemonic for it. People in Ohio like punching Canadians.
People in Ohio like punching Canadians. Okay?
Yes. So those stand for the numbers and letters that are the divided up portions of a staff. So in any staff, there's 1 through 6 and a few other numbers we'll ignore for now. The 1, people, means personnel. In means intelligence. Ohio means operations. Like means logistics. Punching is plans, and Canadians is communications. So personnel, intelligence, operations, logistics, plans, and communications. So on any headquarters staff, you have these functional directorates that are set up to do different portions of the mission. And if it has to do with managing personnel, it's the 1. If it has to do with intelligence, it's the 2. And if it has to do with operations, it's the 3. So I was in the Joint 3, the J3 at CENTCOM, and I was in the division assigned for managing all of the inbound and outbound personnel operations in the CENTCOM Theater of Operations, which is all of the Middle East. What that means is anybody that went in or out some type of headquarters bureaucratic function was happening through my division. Usually what that means is paperwork. If they're going into theater, someone in my division is writing an order. If they're coming out of theater, somebody in my division is writing an order. If they weren't already there and we want to get them there, then we need to write a new requirement that's got to go up to the Secretary of Defense for approval, and that was my job.
So everybody listening, what Ben just described, which is an excellent synopsis of how headquarters staffs work. Thank you for that, Ben. But this is why I always say, like, when you see a movie where the military has got its stuff together and is like on the scene in no time, that's why I say that's never going to happen. because the amount of bureaucracy that Ben just described to do anything is ridiculous. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but go ahead.
It's gonna get worse. So if you go back to like the Iran hostage crisis in the late 70s, where the joint forces all went in and tried to do this special operations mission, and they'll say it failed because of weather, but why it really failed was because the forces didn't work together. The Army was doing their thing, the Air Force was doing their thing, nobody was talking to each other, a bunch of guys crashed into each other, people died, the mission failed, and it was a massive embarrassment for the United States of America. So after that, a couple of guys in Congress wrote a bill named Goldwater and Nichols, and that bill turned into a new organization for the military, where basically the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines all have to give up troops to a single four-star who is joint, and he's in charge of everything happening in a geographic area of the world. So my four-star, General McKenzie, down at CENTCOM, is in charge of the Middle East theater of operations. So the war in Afghanistan, the war against ISIS in Iraq and Syria, all those things are happening under the authority of that four-star. But he isn't naturally assigned any troops. He gets assigned troops that he puts in requests for to the Secretary of Defense, as do all the other four-star commanders. I can see on your face this is getting a bit dense.
Where it's a crash course of squadron officer school is what it's starting to sound like.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it brief, but I'm also trying to help people understand what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, that's why part of the reason you're listening to the Bad Magic podcast, I'd like to think, is that you do find it intriguing, these worlds that Josh and I live in and have been that are different from your own, and you're learning something new. So I'm teaching you about all of this. So the four-star General McKenzie is the commander of CENTCOM, but he doesn't get forces to do his mission unless he requests them. He'll say, I need a unit that can do X capability. He needs an aircraft carrier. He needs a fighter squadron. He needs a ground combat unit, all those kinds of things. And all of the four-star commandments all around the globe put in their requirements, and then the Secretary of Defense, as informed by the President, will deconflict those with the available amount. So if they don't have enough to go around, they look at their priorities defined by the National Command Authority and figure out who gets what. Sometimes they say, sorry, AFRICOM, you can't have it. CENTCOM gets it. And sometimes they say, you each get half.
So this is how we decide where the boats go, where the planes land, and where the people actually fight.
Yeah, and in a steady state, the way this thing is working is everybody's happy. Everything's puttering along in a nominal way, and it's divided up. Maybe there's a little bit of tension, but everybody knows where things are. But things change. Either the bad guys do something we didn't expect, we get a change of administration and they have new priorities.
Hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
Congress changes the budget and there's less resources available. All these are things that could change the situation. And when you're just maintaining the steady state, I didn't really have a job. But when the situation changed, then there was what's called an emergent requirement. That means that my four-star in the Central Command area of operations needs something new that he didn't need before, and he has to ask the Secretary of Defense for it.
But he doesn't have time to actually talk to anybody or write emails, so he sends that down to his staff, and there is some lowly, poor Air Force guy who's in Florida for 6 months that has to actually write up and do all the paperwork to explain why the general needs X.
Exactly. So ultimately what this looks like is a 20-page document that defines everything about these people. Where they're going, how they're getting there, what kind of training they need to have before they go, how many they are, when they're supposed to be there, when they get to go home, who's going to be in charge of them when they get there. All these kinds of things go into a 20-page document.
Which shots that they get before they go?
Yes. Yeah, those kinds of things. So all of that gets written into a document, and that was my job, was to collect all of that information, write it into the document, then put it into all the systems of record, and there was more than one, and send it up to the Secretary of Defense.
This sounds like a very important job, Ben. I'm sure that you got a ton of training before you were expected to do it in real life.
Well, you were talking about squadron officer school. This is the kind of thing they start to prepare you for as soon as you start moving up in the officer ranks. They're like, someday you're going to be in a joint tour and you're going to need to understand how everybody works together. And this is what's called global force management. And when I got there and started doing it, it was right out of the textbook. I mean, right out of the textbook. So technically, yeah, I had gotten some training in advance for it.
Oh, okay. Well, in the most roundabout fashion whatsoever. And it probably helped that you're working in an Army office, because in my experience with the Army, They do things by the book. And when I say by the book, I mean they have the book open and they're reading line by line about what they're supposed to do today.
Yes, it was like that. But I've never had a job, Josh. I got to tell you, there was a time last week where the president was on the television giving his speech about how we have been in America's longest war for 20 years. We're going to be out by September 11th. And there were people shouting at me to do things because of the speech that was happening on the TV. I worked like a 14-hour day that day. And by the end of the day, I had turned in all the paperwork to the Secretary of Defense. And within 2 days, everything I'd done was like on the news. I filled out the paperwork that went to the Secretary of Defense's desk, and he signed it, ordering the thing that I prepared to happen, and yea, verily, it's happening.
I'm deciding how hard I want to crush your dreams right now, because I could just point out that you didn't actually do anything. You were just a cog in the giant system that made that happen.
I get it. But that's a circular argument, Josh. Like, you can say I'm just a cog in the machine, but if you take the cog out of the machine, it doesn't run. And if I was not there that day, that was not happening. It wouldn't have happened.
And you know what, Ben? And I get that. And I'm glad that you get that level of satisfaction from it. All I'm saying is nobody's going to read your autobiography about that experience.
Yeah.
That's
you're
all
right.
I'm saying.
No, I get that. No one's. I am going to get a medal for it, but it's
that's all right. Everybody settle down. That's standard. If you're deployed, even with air quotes, you get a medal.
My predecessor didn't get a medal, so you don't always get a medal.
How did your predecessor not get a medal? That's,
the poor guy. I feel really bad for him because he got there in the middle of COVID, where they didn't know how to operate, so he didn't get any training. He didn't get any. He couldn't be in the office at the same time as someone else. They staggered the schedules, and then he, when he would like pick up the phone to try to call someone to figure it out, he just didn't have any support, and so he just didn't know what to do.
What I'm hearing is an excuse for why he was terrible at his job. Like, you're so nice to people, Ben. Like, if he was just bad. Like, yeah, there were circumstances.
I spent time with the guy. I mean, he was just he wasn't resilient enough and wasn't able to overcome the hurdles that were placed in his way, and they were significant hurdles. It was unprecedented.
Wasn't that your job as a major, to overcome hurdles?
He got there a year ago. Think about what was happening a year ago. I was working 12-hour shifts overnight in the operations center while my entire command was staggering trying to figure out what to do about how to operate post-quarantine.
I was quarantined working from home and just as happy as could be.
I know. And yeah.
So much better on this side, dude. You got to get out of the military.
But I think if I had gotten there a year ago and had been handed this job, it would have been difficult. It would have been difficult to try to figure out how to do it, how to make it happen, how to, figure out the relationships and overcome all the obstacles. It would have been really hard.
Okay. Well, fair enough. You're being super nice to a guy that probably doesn't deserve it, but that's how you roll. So anyway,
okay.
Put a bow on it. 6 months
all right.
in Florida.
So that was the job. It was a very satisfying job. Like, I felt important. I was able to pick it up in a relatively short amount of time, and I felt like I had an impact. When I left, it was better than when I got there. I felt like I was able to do some meaningful things that were an important contribution as far as being a major on a staff of a 4-star general goes.
You ran a half marathon.
Yes.
You caught a deadly virus and recovered. You suffered a catastrophic injury.
I lost 30 pounds.
Did you get a Purple Heart, Ben?
No, the award I get for that happens when I retire and the VA makes a determination if I have disability or not.
That's not really a reward, but okay.
So
I'll get there.
I lived in Florida back in 2004, 2005 before I met you, just for a few months. I was way up in the Panhandle near Pensacola area, and
okay.
I hated it. I thought Florida was a terrible place, but man, Tampa is so different. Like,
well, you're talking. Hang on a second. The Panhandle of Florida, like, they don't even associate with the rest of Florida. They're
right.
more Georgians than they are Floridians.
It's Lower Alabama, as they say. FLA stands for From Lower Alabama.
Yeah, there you go. Like, Florida is huge, and it's so geographically diverse that it is wildly different on different parts of that state.
Yeah, so I met I left knowing how long I was going to be there. I had fitness goals, which I met. I had personal goals, which I met, other than, as you pointed out, because you're good at pointing out my failures, that I didn't get the assignment orders changed to forego the vaccinations. But I did really enjoy my time in Tampa, so much so that there's this little seed planted in the back of my mind where I think maybe someday if I ever get rich, I'll get a condo and winter in Tampa, because I liked it that much. The beaches were beautiful. I would recommend it to anyone who's looking to vacation somewhere. Like, don't go to Orlando. That's where all the tourists are. Go to Tampa. It's awesome. Everywhere is a beach. They're all great. The city's beautiful. There's lots of great places to eat. There's lots to do. I loved it. It was fantastic.
Have you ever been in a place that you didn't think was amazing and fantastic, Ben?
I get that you're trying to color me as overly optimistic, but I just told you I hated the other place I lived in Florida.
That's true. Well, I don't know. Something about like you being so happy makes me want to bring you back down into the muck with the rest of us. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just my pessimistic attitude.
I wholeheartedly recommend Tampa. It's fantastic. So I'm back from Florida, back to my regular job. Really, I'm just getting ready to move to Louisiana. So that's what's next. So getting ready to start packing up the house and moving the family out. We just got to we got like 3 or 4 weeks of school left to get the kids done. Then got to get my eldest married to his beautiful fiance, and then packing up and moving to Louisiana.
Yeah, when is the move to Louisiana?
It's going to be the first week of July, I hope, if everything goes okay. I still got to get the Air Force to give me orders yet, but that's a Ben versus bureaucracy for next week.
Well, at least it's not going to be super hot and humid in any of the states that you're moving to or from.
Right. I got that going for me. So one other follow-up I want to do is I'd asked you, and you'd promised potentially some type of follow-up regarding your computer setup. Now, I want to set the stage a little bit. Listeners, if you haven't figured this out by now, Josh loves projects. Like, he loves to just create and build and do, and he never lets it stop him if it's something he's never done before. It's just all the more reason to really dive in, do a lot of research, and learn something new and get good at it. And so maybe it was triggered by the podcast, but when he decided he needed to upgrade his old computer that he'd been using for like a decade, it turned into like this crazy thing. It was also brought on by COVID. But so what'd you end up doing? What's the current situation?
I've mentioned enough on the podcast just how much I gush over my current work from home setup and how great it is. And I'll tell you, Ben, I worked at my office yesterday. I physically go into the office once a week, and I was there yesterday. And I just hated it the whole time. It was like 1,000 little inconvenient things that I just added up to be this super uncomfortable experience. And it was so nice getting up early and sitting down in my chair at my computer and doing the work. Like, it was just night and day difference.
What a great situation to be in, where your home office is so superior to your work office.
Oh yeah, and it's just I love it to death. It's my favorite.
Okay.
But I've spoken about it enough on the podcast that people were curious, and people were hitting us up on the Reddit and social media and asking like for a deep dive into everything about it, because I have pieces here and there. Like I've talked about it a couple times on the podcast. There's a YouTube video on our channel where I did a full build of the computer last year, but I haven't gone back and like done an update on this is what I've done since. This is the whole setup. This is all the peripherals. And so at first I had the idea I was going to do a YouTube video, but then I couldn't help but compare like whatever I would do to all of those different review videos that you see online done by professional YouTubers with editors and editing software. And I just don't think I could pull that off with the time that I have, the skill set that I have, and the freeware stuff that I download to actually do the videos with. So I actually decided to do an article on our website because I haven't done one on there for ages. So I did a full write-up. I tried to go through every piece of the setup that I have, the computer, the desk, the chairs, the audio, the video, monitors, the whole thing. I tried to put as much detail in as I could. I put as many links to the different products and reviews and things that I could find. And so I really just wanted to give all of that explanation out to the void. And if anybody finds it interesting, then hooray.
Okay, so I'll put a link to that article, which he wrote, which is excellent, by the way, in the show notes. So if you want to go there and see it, or you can just go to badatmagic.live and see it on the website. Now, I got to say, of all the things that you did in that project, probably my favorite is at some point when you realized, it'd be really great is if I could just take my computer and stick it in the wall over here. And you cut a giant hole in the wall and built like a nook for your computer. That was awesome.
Well, I mean, yeah, that wasn't so admittedly, the first time that I cut a hole in that wall, it took the whole weekend. Like I built a big shelf unit in a pillar and it goes all the way through. But after that experience, it was like old hat. I'm like, oh yeah, I've put holes in walls. And I literally knocked out that cubby in a couple hours.
Nice. That's fantastic. Yeah, and it looks great. So there's photos and everything. So go to Josh's, go to badatmagic.live and check it out. All right.
The real thanks for the entire setup has to go to my wife, who either a varying range of supported to tolerated every step of that project.
Yeah. Speaking of wives, mine was very unsatisfied with my retraction I did last time. She doesn't. I don't know if she'll request them again in the future. But
well, to be fair, your retraction was one of those. I am being obligated to read this prepared statement, but I was still.
You didn't help.
I'm not here to help. When have I ever said I'm here to help?
All right. Well, speaking of not helping, let's do a bad at parenting segment.
Oh, bad at parenting. This is where we fail continuously at not helping people become people. So, Ben, you have 6 kids.
Yes.
So I'm sure that you've experienced this situation I'm about to describe to you before, but this was the first time that it ever really happened to me. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So here's the thing. My oldest, my son, is a terrible liar. He's just bad at it. And he feels an inherent guilt whenever he tries to pull it off. So he immediately recants. Whenever he says something that isn't true, you can see it start to break him down physically. And you just wait 5 seconds, okay, no, that wasn't true. Okay, good. But my daughter, on the other hand, I don't know what it is, but she got that gene from somewhere in our primordial ancestry where, man.
She can lie convincingly with a straight face.
So let me draw the situation for you. We were reading bedtime stories, okay? And we're all sitting around, and I'm reading this book, and I like reading the books to the kids because I get to do the different voices and things that I normally say for my D&D sessions that I have not had because of COVID. So I'm getting all my acting out with the bedtime stories.
Yeah.
And then
That's awesome. So I'm imagining you telling bedtime stories the same way that you DM a campaign.
My daughter loves it when I do Amelia Bedelia because I do all the voices for all the different people.
That was a childhood classic for me. I love Amelia Bedelia.
Yeah, if she didn't bake, I'm convinced she'd be a felon.
Yeah.
But, anyway, we're lying on the floor and I'm reading this book, and at one point I stopped because I noticed that my daughter has big scratches in her forearms. And we have cats, and she has this bad habit of grabbing a cat, but just hugging it to her, or like restricting the cat's movement to the point where the cat feels like it needs to fight to get away from her.
Uh-huh.
And we've told her, I don't even know.
That's a very stereotypical little girl thing to do.
Right. And we keep we've told her a bunch of times, and she's starting to get in trouble for it because a couple of times she's got deep scratches on her face. I'm like, if that cat takes out your eye, we can't fix that. And how do you explain that to a 6-year-old?
You'll look. Do you see Nick Fury here? That's what happens.
Yeah, that'll be you. Do you want to be Nick Fury? But she's 6, so she's like, yes, of course I'm going to be Nick Fury. Anyway, so I see these deep scratches on her forearm, and I go, Jane, where did you get those scratches? And then she goes, from my dollhouse. Instantly, no hesitation, and looking me dead in the eye with a straight face.
Because she knows that you knew she wasn't supposed to hug the cats in that way, and she didn't want to fess up.
Exactly. She knew that she was going to get in trouble if she said it was from one of the cats. And honestly, Ben, I had no clue. It was totally legit. Looked me dead in the eye, straight face, no ticks. Until 2 seconds later, when she took her other arm and just swapped places on her forearm to guiltily cover up the scratches.
So you'd stop looking at it and trying to evaluate if it was possible to come from a dollhouse?
Well, that's when I knew. I knew at that moment, it's she is lying to me. she is straight-faced lying to me.
Wow.
And so like I was stopped for like 5 seconds, like, I don't know how to call her out on this. So I didn't in the moment. So I looked at her like with that sly side of the eye, like, I don't really believe you, but I don't think she's picking up on that because she's 6. And then I continued reading the storybook. And then we finished story time and we sent the kids out of the room to go brush their teeth, do the bedtime preparation stuff. And I sat up and Nicole was on the couch and I go, your daughter just straight-faced lied to me and I don't know how to call her out on it. And so between us, we then like approached it like, at the time I thought we were just being parents, but it turned out we were being good cop, bad cop. And somehow I ended up being good cop, which...
Are you not normally good cop?
Do I sound like a good cop?
Like, I don't know. You set it up in your house that mommy's the queen and you're below her in the hierarchy.
I guess that's true. Well, let's get farther in the story before I'll let you decide. So then we go to my daughter's room, like tuck in the boy and go to the daughter's room and like, okay, how did you get these scratches? Oh, on my dollhouse right here. Like, how? And we look, because these are clearly...
At least
like,
you remember what her lie was. It's good.
Which is legit. Good on her for, if you're going to lie well. But here's the thing, Ben. She had multiple scratches that are like, they're from a cat. They're pinprick, straight line scratches. For,
sure.
Like 4 to 6 inches.
They're claw width apart.
Well, there's only one in each place, but there were multiple places. One across the back of her forearm, one like on the inside of her wrist at different angles.
Yeah.
And then she goes like, how did your dollhouse give you these scratches? Like this. And the thing is, the only part of her dollhouse that could possibly scratch her is like at her shoulder level. Mm-hmm. And so she's like showing how like she would rub her arm against it to give her that scratch. And then I go, oh, so your dollhouse scratched you, huh? And I started rubbing my arm up and down vigorously on that part of the dollhouse because the roof of this dollhouse bin is foam core. Like, this is incapable of causing any physical harm to anyone.
Like this? Did you do it like this?
Yeah,
How's
like
that?
this. Like, and then I showed her my forearm and I said, Jane, I don't have any scratches. And she goes, oh, I forgot it was my bed. Oh, your bed did the scratches. Where did your bed scratch you? She's like, this part right here, this part here. And I did the same thing.
I could do this all day.
And then, but then it's my wife and I, and Nicole goes, are you lying to us? She goes, no. Jane, are you lying to us? No. And deadpan adamant, she's not lying to us multiple times. Like, all right, let us explain what's going on. We are giving you the opportunity to come clean because she didn't at all. And she's just stonewalled us. Like, nope, this is what happened. It was the bed. It took us telling her, Jane, we know that you are lying. And now you're in way bigger trouble for lying to us than for, cuddling the cat like you were, you're not supposed to and you know about it.
The cat thing is off the table. Now we're talking about the fact that you're deliberately trying to deceive us.
Yes. This is we have to be able to trust you. This goes way beyond anything that you understand right now. This is going to affect your entire life. And this is the thing is my wife was at her level, in her eyes, doing the good parent, the mom thing. No, you don't get to be upset right now. You lied. You are in trouble. This is why. And I'm explaining it to you. And then she started crying and bawling. And Nicole's knock it off. There's none of that. This is not an emotional situation. You messed up. You don't get to cry about it. And
wow.
And I'm not saying she wasn't laying into her. She was not. We never struck her. We were not yelling at her. We didn't elevate our voices or start screaming obscenities or none of that. This was a cordial conversation the entire time. Had
your family already established some type of understood consequence for lying?
No, none whatsoever. We're flying by the seat of our pants. We don't have these hardcore systems in place yet like you would have had to have by the time you get your 4th child.
Yeah.
I understand that you have probably a very systematic. You could probably go pull a 3-ring binder and flip to procedure alpha for
maybe sometime I'll tell you about our behavior management system, but not today.
Well, anyway, so during this, Jane is obviously emotionally distraught and she's really sad and she's still 6. And maybe it's got something to do with the fact that it's my daughter and I'm just weaker on my daughter than I am on my son.
Yeah.
But and my wife is yelling at her and there's a break in the conversation. Jane, I want you to understand, we still love you. But you made a mistake and we need to fix it. This is something that we're going to work on together because our job is to make you a better person.
This is a profound moment in the life cycle of a parent.
What's that? The
where
lying?
Yeah, where you realize that you don't want a child to lie to you the way that you lied to your parents, and you think that you can break the cycle.
Well, I'm not. No, here's the thing: is I'm not going to break the cycle because kids lie, and that's fine. That is a skill that you have to learn. You have to know when to lie, how to lie, and what to lie about. Those are important lessons to learn too. However, I'm not going to teach them that.
Yeah, but I didn't learn that stuff because yeah, exactly. You don't learn those things because your parents taught you that.
No, exactly. What your parents do is they set the boundaries and the expectations. Like, these are the things that you cannot and shall not lie about. Like, that's, I think, the parent's job.
I think every parent says some version of what you just said a few minutes ago about how whatever it is, they're lying to get out of trouble for something, and the lying compounds the situation. It becomes its own infraction. And
Right.
That's really what you want to avoid, or what you're trying to get at.
Oh, and this is what we pounded into her head for that whole night, and then for the week that she was grounded afterwards.
Whoa,
Like,
grounded for a week.
Oh, Ben, yeah, that's
okay.
That's all
What's the punishment for cuddling the cats too tightly?
Probably grounded for a day or two.
Okay,
like,
so
a scolding.
Did she understand that she traded a day of trouble for roughhousing the cats for a week of trouble for telling a lie? Did she get that?
I'll put it this way: we told her that. We beat it into her skull for that entire week. Whether or not those two neurons connected in her brain, I have no idea.
What does 6-year-old grounded look like anyway? You're in quarantine.
No screens.
Oh.
Like, all you do is school. Oh, we also made her write. We we wasted her time. Like, this is the thing. Like, the first level of punishment for quarantine is no screens. Like, no video games, no TV, no movies, no TV shows.
Yeah.
The second level is you're wasting my time, so now I'm going to waste your time. So, like, when she was done with school for the day, I would hand her a sheet with, at the very top, I had printed in letters, "I will make better choices." I'm like, read this out to me. And, like, I helped her read it. I go, okay, now you're going to fill up this entire paper with these words. Go. And just stupid things like that.
Now, I assume she's not actually going to do it unless either you or Nicole is sitting there staring over her shoulder making her do it.
Well, we are both working. So this is the thing, is like, they're done with school at like 2. We both work for another 2 or 3 hours. So it's tough to like lean over them and like thou shalt. But I made her sit at the table behind me, and like you sit there until this is done. But yeah, I don't know. I generally have good kids. So like, she just did it. Like, she didn't complain or nothing. She just did the whole thing. Like, do you understand why you did this? What are you in, like, and we asked her this every day. What are you in trouble for? Because I lied. Thank you. Like, you are in trouble, not because you did the cat, but because you lied to us about it.
Okay. All right. Well, give me an update next time she lies and she gets caught. I remember my first 2 didn't really lie to us, but my third one, she would tell us a lie, and my wife and I would both give her the look, and we do like you and Nicole did, and we would call her out on it. And the first thing she would say is, she'd get this funny look in her eye, and she would go, "How do you know that I'm lying?" And that just makes your skin crawl as a parent. You're like, this child isn't worried about not getting in trouble. She just wants to know how to not get caught next time.
So this is the real danger zone when it comes to dealing with this specific issue, okay? It is not that you're caught your kid in a lie and you want to teach them not to lie. It's that there's 2 outcomes from this punishment, Ben. My daughter is either going to learn, I should not lie to my parents. I should not lie to my parents. Or she's going to learn, I need to lie better to my parents.
Yeah, exactly. We're teaching you how to get good at this so that you won't get caught.
Yeah. So hopefully I'm not pushing the threshold higher or improving her skill set. Hopefully she'll learn the lesson that my son did at some point somehow, that like, just don't lie to us.
I don't see how you're not teaching them that lesson no matter what, that second one. But the first one, I mean, if you're really coming from a sincere place, that's why I tried to take it one level deeper. Not just, you were going to get in trouble for this one thing, but then you lied to us, so now you're in more trouble because you also did that, which is in this case, an even more severe infraction. But really, I would get below it to, why do we care if you're lying or not? Why does it matter to us? Why are we so upset about it? And
that's what I told her. I said that.
All right, so what did you tell her? What's your reasoning why you were upset about being lied to?
It was the 6-year-old version of integrity. It's like, because when you say something, we have to trust that you're telling us is real. Just like when I tell you stuff, you have to trust that what I'm saying is real. And if you lie to us, now we don't know if what you're saying is real or not.
Sometimes I wonder when we give lectures like that if they aren't thinking in their head about all the things we lie to them about.
Well, I try not to lie to my kids, like, outrageously.
You guys still play the Santa Claus game, right?
Yeah, well, Ben, don't you jump on the moral high ground with Santa Claus as your argument. That's just not going to work.
There's lots of versions of that. There's things that we just lie to kids about.
I don't want to go down that road right now.
Yeah.
But I understand what you're saying. But this goes back to what I said before. You have to some point learn what to lie about and what the thresholds and the boundaries are. So
I mean, they aren't always as clear as this, but it's like, honey, you can't drink alcohol. Only adults can do that. You can't tell lies. Only grown-ups can do that.
It's the threshold. Like, this is level 1, Ben. Obey now, understand later. Like, when you're a teenager, I'll explain to you the things that I don't care if you lie. Like, if I ask you how your day is and you say, oh, it was fine, and you're lying to me, I don't care. If I say, are you doing drugs, and you lie to me, I'm going to care about that.
All right, there's one other thread on what you told me that I want to pull on, and that is you were kind of inferring that I had this elaborate plan, and sometimes our elaborate plan wasn't because we're like better parents than you or something like that. It was because when you described how you had a consequence and that involved you wasted my time, now I'm going to waste your time, is that what you're not saying is that in order to enforce a consequence like that on a child, it's still very involved. It really requires your attention and your devotion to it. Now, if I have 2 children and one of them's bad at lying and one of them's trying it out, you can devote 100% of your attention on the second child to make trouble over the lie, right?
Right.
But when you have a third and a fourth and a fifth and a sixth child, I no longer can do that. I don't have the luxury of using my full-time devoted attention on one child in that way. So we had to come up with a system that allows is a force multiplier for being able to apply consequences for children. And that's why we had our system.
I'm starting to see how you could total 2 cars in the rich household and still be allowed to drive after that.
Exactly. I don't got time to enforce the teenager on, ground her for a month from driving. I need her to take her brother to choir concert.
Dang it. You need more kids of driving age in the house.
Yeah. So one thing we talked about a while ago is that you were off on a rant about digital rights management and kind of where the trend of where this is going in the future, and it came up again. So what was the situation in which it came up?
Ben, we don't own anything that we buy anymore, Ben. And so this was at work. I got this one from work because one of the clients that I do regular accounting for bought a Tesla. And then I started seeing on all of his statements that I'm reconciling and doing his books on, I'm seeing this $11 charge to Tesla like every couple of weeks. And so finally I called him like, hey, what is this? Like if it was like 20 or 30 bucks at a time, I'm thinking, okay, he's getting accessories or he's going back to the shop for little tweaks or whatever, but it's the same exact number every time. He goes, oh, that's the subscription service for the software updates and the unlocks for the car. And I go, what are you talking about? And then he told me about it, and then I had to look it up. Tesla is locking a bunch of their cars' capabilities behind a subscription service in the software. Every Tesla ships with everything, every feature that you could possibly have on the Tesla. It's all locked in software.
Okay, I can see why this is a profound disturbance in the force for you.
Yes. And then I was reading an article about it, and one article is talking about the company as a whole. Like the biggest thing Tesla has on the market right now is their self-driving capability. It's far beyond what all the other competitors have, right? Everybody's heard that Teslas can drive themselves for the most part in most situations nowadays. Yeah, I know. Make that noise, but they're still the most advanced one out there, right? Which is the problem. This means that they're the trendsetters, they're the frontiers, the pioneers in this industry. And they are talking about locking the self-driving feature behind a $100 a month subscription service. So Ben, look me in the
Okay,
eye.
I get it. So let me restate it in another way that sounds more offensive. So you purchased a vehicle from them. You believe that you own the vehicle, but there are features that vehicle, there are capabilities that vehicle has that they are holding hostage, and you have to pay a subscription fee in order to access them.
Yes, this car that I bought for a ton of money has all of these great features that I want, but in order to have access to them, I have to keep paying you for the rest of my life, regardless of the fact that I own this vehicle.
You're talking about this like it's new, but I just don't think it is. I mean, go back to like Alexander Graham Bell and the telephone. It's a wire that goes all the way to your house that connects to a wire on the other side of the world. But just because it's capable of calling the other side of the world doesn't mean...
No. You are talking about infrastructure that has to be maintained by a third party, so it makes sense that you have to pay for the service. You're paying for
how are the software updates and the maintenance not infrastructure?
What? No. I bought this vehicle. If you say that I have to pay for software updates and new things, I will agree with you. But this car already has all of the features and updates up to the level of the day that I purchased it. But I still don't have access to them unless I continue to pay you money. This is all right. So all these industries are moving this way. Every piece of software that you've ever seen, Microsoft Office, you used to be able to. I got it for free in college, and I used it on my desktop forever. And now it's a subscription service. You've got to pay annually for Office. Everything is not everything is a service, Ben. I just want a thing. I want a one-time used thing.
You don't though. Okay, you brought this up because you know I was going to oppose you a bit on it, and let me tell you how. So yes, I worked for Microsoft for 3 years, and during that time, we did 2 major software updates. And I saw us go from Office XP to Office 2004 or whatever it was during that time. And the thing is that change that you're not speaking about fairly is that when you had major software versions come out, there was new features that came along with those, and they were significant. Like, there were big changes that happened during that time. And if you had the old version and there was an update release, all it was like a major bug repair. There were no additional features. There were no changes. There were no improvements on it. If you paid Microsoft $299 to get Microsoft Office XP, you just had that forever. And it was static and unchanging. When you buy Office 365, you're getting a service. You get new features all the time.
I get that. I understand what you're saying, but here's the problem. The way that the industry trends are moving is I'm not going to have the option soon of just buying the one-time thing. Everything is moving to this. Oh, everything is a service. Your car that you purchased for a huge amount of money is a service. That's BS. The car is a thing that sits in my driveway. I should own it. It is not a service that I should continually have to pay for.
See, and you with a degree in computer engineering, I think you should value the work of the software engineers more.
You're missing the point.
No, I'm not missing the point. I'm just telling it a different way.
No. If me as the consumer, if I sign on a line and say, yea, verily, I understand and I recognize that I am not getting software updates, that I do not want any of the new features. I want what I am paying for right now. And I don't even, that's it. Then
but they're inseparable. The driving isn't just a bit of hardware and a capability of some cameras and some processors in your car. It's also the software. They need to be able to maintain it.
We can argue and nitpick this one to death. What I hate about it is that this is an indicator for all industries everywhere.
I think we're better off.
Ben, this is the Black Mirror episode where the guy was paying, like he saw his account going down when he was getting toothpaste out of the dispenser. Like the end of this logical road is that we rent everything in our lives, from our clothes to our computers to our entertainment to our living space to everything, to the point where we don't own anything and we just become like indentured servants to the corporate man who owns all of the things that we have in our life.
What if we're better off that way?
How are we better off in a world where we don't own anything, where ownership means nothing?
Because did you ever really own it in the first place? I mean, when you bought the full version of Microsoft Office, you got like 8 applications. Maybe you used 3 of them. And you know, you didn't need the whole thing. You bought a bunch of stuff, and you signed an end user license agreement that said they could come to your house and uninstall it off your computer. Like that's not new. That goes back to the 80s. So they retain ownership of it all along. So really, it was an illusion to begin with.
Okay. We're talking about nitpicks again. Now there was another, as a part of this, because I was on a rant that day when I sent you that, and there was a video that came out from Linus Tech Tips about this thing specifically.
That's about a different aspect of it. I want to be nuanced here. That was about right to repair.
Oh, no, hang on. There was, did I send? All right, so there's a couple things. There's right to repair, but I also sent you another video clip where they were talking about a news article where there was a man who had purchased upwards of $25,000 worth of digital content in books, movies, audio. Like he purchased all these. He purchased upwards of $25,000 of things, purchased them with money that he owned that were associated with his iOS login account. And then he violated Apple's terms of service, and they shut down his account, and he was no longer allowed to log in. And he lost access to all of his content. And he is suing them because he owns theoretically all of this stuff. And Apple's thrown their hands like, no, you didn't. You purchased all of that on your account, but now your account ultimately belongs to us.
Yeah.
So
I get that. I mean, yeah, you can't even do it in the first place unless you agree to their terms of service. And if you violate the terms of service, what do you do, by the way? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Huh.
Honestly, it doesn't matter. Like, yeah, he could be a horrible human being that was using it to do terrorism. But this is my point. If you can't, if Apple in this case has the ability and the right. This is the problem.
This is not unprecedented.
No.
Okay, we gave you paid $50,000 for this car, but you drove drunk, and we took away your driver's license. Yeah, you own the car, but you can't drive it. Like these are not new concepts.
Apples and oranges, man. Like if I purchase something, a corporate master shouldn't be able to come down and take it away from me because I used it in a way that they disagree with. Like you're talking about the government. I'm talking about a random corporation.
Yeah, I think the transition from a waterfall-based, iterative, pay one time for each major revision model of acquiring things is strictly worse than a subscription-based service where you continually get improvements, updates, and additional features.
You are stuck on the software because, listen, you're right. I am a computer scientist.
But
I understand. I understand software engineering.
You think I've gone off on a tangent, but I'm saying software is at the heart of this transformation. Software is the reason this has happened.
I want to disagree with you because there are some things that I should still be able to own that don't fit into that box that you're trying to put everything in. A movie is not software. If I buy a movie through a service, I should own that movie forever, despite
intellectual property laws are a whole other thing entirely. I used to have to teach a unit on it. I remember when I was teaching middle school back in 2003, 2004, it was right at the time when the Motion Picture Association and the recording artist industry were just wringing their hands about what to do about like Napster and LimeWire. And Kazaa. They just didn't know what to do. And so they were suing like 14-year-old kids and grannies who, somebody hacked into their computer and was using their hard drive as a file server. And there was this, right at the peak of this, there was this commercial that came out. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. There was a Pepsi commercial where they were playing a Green Day cover of I Fought the Law and the Law Won. And there was like 14-year-olds who had actually been sued by the RIAA who were talking about how just, look inside your Pepsi bottle and you can get a free download that's fully legal and you won't get sued and go to jail for downloading music off the internet. So intellectual property is one thing, software is another thing, but really underneath it all is there's a lot of effort that goes into creating a movie or a song or a piece of software. And a Tesla, even though it looks like a Model T Ford, sorta, is not. It is a combination of the hardware and the software that's on it.
Ben, I have never wanted to slap you more than I want to right now.
Well, luckily you're in Arizona and I'm in Illinois.
Are you being deliberately dense? Like these are
no.
We're talking about the right to own things that you purchase. All right. Right now, you are sitting in a room and behind you is a bookshelf. if somebody from, I'm going to say McGraw-Hill came, knocked on your door and said, hey, all of those books belong to us because you haven't read them the way that we want you to. Give them all to us right now. And then they had like a warrant and they enforced their claim to the books that are on your shelf. How would you feel about that?
I would feel violated and betrayed.
This is what I'm talking about. With everything
I don't think
moving,
it's the same thing.
I'm gonna lose. I'm gonna poop my pants. I am so frustrated with you right now.
I don't think it's the same thing.
It is exact. If I buy a book, regardless of the service I'm buying it on, if they use the word purchase and I am buying a book, I am giving you my hard-earned, sweat-induced cash.
You're trying to place it into a moral box that it just doesn't fit into because of how profoundly the internet age has transformed the way we can do things. Like, I could have that book and I can make 1 billion copies of it in like 1 second. But if I just own a physical copy of a book and I want to copy it, I would have to stick it on a photocopier or write it out in hand like a Benedictine monk. Like it's just completely different. You can't compare those two things.
Okay. So if we're talking about digital media, so then you're saying that because the convenience of digital media, you are willing as a consumer to give up all claims to everything that you own in your life if it's more convenient to access.
Yes, because if you were to say the same protections and ownership that I have over a physical thing, I'm having trouble putting this into words. I don't want to trade all of the benefits of ownership I have of a thing that only exists in physical space for all of the benefits I get from owning something in a digital space.
Okay, I think this might be the heart of our disagreement, because what I'm saying is that the tenet of ownership of a consumer should be held sacrosanct, and that instead of pursuing or punishing the person who paid for the content, the consumer, there should be more effort put into prevention or technologies that stop me from making 1 billion copies of a digital book and distributing it. How about instead of coming after me and taking my books away, how about you come up with a better technology that prevents me from doing it in the first place?
I get that, and I like that. So the example I gave of the RIA suing children, it only lasted for a few months, and it was very unpopular. It didn't work. It didn't lead to where they wanted to be, and eventually they transformed, and now they make most of their money off of streaming.
Because shockingly, multi-million-dollar corporations, when they get on board with things, can execute it better than any random Mapster guy can in the first place.
And that was a necessary change, and it was an important change, and I agree. But the existence of the internet age makes it so that you can't restrict ownership of things the same way you could with a physical object. So to compare the two isn't fair.
I don't want to be living in the dystopian nightmare future where I don't own anything. And like if somebody gets mad at me at a corporate office or somebody in a call center gets a thumb up their butt, they can click a button and take away all of my stuff. Like that's terrifying to me, because companies make way too many mistakes for me to trust them with the ownership of my stuff. What if you're driving down the freeway in your Tesla that you've bought and paid for and you're paying the subscription for, and somebody screws up at the company and all of a sudden all of your extra features shut down, the car pulls over and won't start?
So there was a movie back in the 90s, right at the beginning of the internet age, that was a bit prescient with Sandra Bullock. It was called The Net. Did you see it?
I did. I saw that so long ago, I barely remember what it is.
Okay.
Like somebody basically
the premise of it was exactly what you just described. Maybe you're forgetting, and just like that scene from the Ninja Turtles. You're describing the exact scenario that happened. She pissed off the wrong person, and they had all the buttons to click to take away her identity and her access to all of the things, and she was just screwed. I get that. I don't know. I guess I'm willing to trade that risk for the convenience and accessibility that we get in exchange for all of that. There's not a way to do it. There's not a way. And when they try, it's really ugly and bad.
Well, all I'm saying is that we need to be aware of these things happening, because if we're all just happily marching into the future the way that you do, blind to the pitfalls, we might end up in a place we don't want to be. Like maybe, Slaughterhouse-5 style. Maybe
I just understand the trade-off and I'm willing to make it.
Oh, I understand the trade-offs, Ben. I'm saying that the companies are taking way more of an aggressive stance against us than they should be. I don't like the balance right now.
I agree with you, and I think there've been positive trends. Like, I'll post a graphic I've seen of companies' end user license agreements growing and growing and growing. Like every listener to this podcast has agreed to dozens upon dozens of end user license agreements because it's the very first thing they stick in front of you before you can use a piece of software. If you're going to use this, you have to agree to this, and they let you read it. They even make you click a little box that says "I read it," but for the most part, they're unreadable. They're written by lawyers. They're dozens upon dozens of pages long. They're incomprehensible and stuff. I've actually bothered to read them more often than not, and it's out of control. I agree.
I'm of the hope and the understanding that if I'm using software in a way that it's meant to be used, and I get shut out because of an end user license agreement problem, that every court and every judge would side with me because, like, hey, your EULA is absolutely ridiculous and you make people agree to it or they can't have access. Like,
yeah,
it's a completely one-sided transaction.
I don't know if that case has ever actually happened, but you're talking about courts and judges, and if you had to wait for your life to move on until you actually got in front of a judge in a court, yeah, that sounds horrific.
I don't like the vectors, man. I'm just looking at the vectors, and I don't like where they're pointing in the long run. So we have to make.
I'm glad you're around. I'm glad you're around to be alarmed about this and to raise the alarm and to upvote Linus's videos about this, because I'm not going to.
Wake up, sheeple! Apple's going to turn off your access to everything.
I get that dystopian futures are reliant on the fact of us willingly agreeing to all these controls being put into place. And once all the infrastructure is laid down for controlling it, then all it takes is the right malevolent presence to just push the button.
Oh, dude, that transitions so well into our main segment. Our main segment is a movie set in a dystopian nightmare future.
It is both dystopian and utopian at the same time, which is an interesting combo.
Which is exactly what it would be in the real world. So we're going to do the full Bad at Magic, normal movie, pop culture treatment to this thing, which means Ben's probably going to break down all the meta stuff. I'm going to be really wrapped around the axle about story and character development. And at the end, we're going to put an arbitrary grading system to it based on the Sandersonian laws of magic.
Yes. So we're talking about the 2002 film Minority Report, but directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Tom Cruise.
Starring Tom Cruise high on drugs for the entire movie.
This is right after Steven Spielberg finished doing AI, the Haley Joel Osment movie about a little boy that was like artificial intelligence. So he was already in the future mindset, and Tom Cruise had just come off of Mission Impossible 2. And Tom Cruise had a little burr under his saddle. He was kind of excited to do a science fiction thing. He was looking for the right vehicle, and he brought this movie to Steven Spielberg and says, "Let's do this." So they did. It's based on a Philip K. Dick short story called Minority Report, which is kind of an exception because most of the time his short stories had really weird, obscure titles, and they didn't always get called by it. Like, for instance, Blade Runner was called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is a terrible title for a movie. Blade Runner is really cool. Other Philip K. Dick adaptations that had happened, Total Recall was based on We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, also by Philip K. Dick. So what I did, one of the things I did in preparation for this episode is I went and read the Philip K. Dick short story by that title, Minority Report.
Of course you did. So how well does it hold up to the movie, the film adaptation?
So I was conscious of the idea that people always talk about and say, oh, it was better than the book or it was worse than the book. And this one really struck me about the fact that the short story was short. Like, it took less time to read the short story than it did to watch the movie.
Wow.
Which meant, by definition, the story couldn't contain enough for you to make that comparison like you traditionally do. You know, if you're reading a 1,000-page J.K. Rowling novel, you're going to be disappointed by a few things they had to leave out to fit it into 4 hours worth of movie. But if you read, you know, a short story that took you an hour to read and you watch a 2-hour movie, something had to get longer.
Okay. So did it hold up? Like, were the core story tenets and things there?
Yeah, so he wrote it back in the oh crap, I forgot the date of it. I thought
give us a decade.
Back in the 60s or something like that, and it was the same kind of idea of just at some point in the future this thing's going to happen. And Philip K. Dick was known for being really thinking about our view of reality and our concept of mind and our morality surrounding our agency for our life and how we interact with other people.
And that makes sense just based on the other movies or the other short stories that he wrote. With between Blade Runner and Total Recall, like the core tenet between all of these movies is what you are experiencing, is it real?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's kind of what's happening here. So this is set in the year 2054, and the screenplay was originally the short story by Dick. Then it was written into a movie by a guy named John Cohen in 97, and then it was rewritten again by Scott Frank. And Scott Frank did a really interesting thing. He changed the ending significantly. But if you were to look at the original Philip K. Dick short story, the names of all the characters are the same. Most of the major plot details are the same. The high-tech stuff is very different, but Dick didn't have time to go into it, so it was really up to the filmmakers to do that. But what Spielberg did first is he focused on the story. What story are we going to tell? And then we'll layer in the technology. So give us the plot synopsis, and then I'll come back to the meta stuff.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that meta breakdown, Ben. This has been your meta moment with Ben Rich. No, but the story of Minority Report is a really interesting one in that we handwave a ton of stuff. It's set in 2054. We have this experimental law enforcement agency called Pre-Crime. They have 3 people, in air quotes, that can see the future, but the only thing that they can see is murder for reasons that we handwave away. But they can see it with enough time in advance that we can action on it, and this law enforcement agency is specialized in deducing and pulling the facts out of these visions and figuring out what's going to happen, where, and to who, and preventing it from happening in the first place. And then punishing the would-be perpetrators as if they had committed the crime in the first place. And so the whole point is, like, we open in the movie starts with case 1108, which is a guy walking in and his wife cheating on him with another man. And he, in a fit of passion, murders them both. And it's a great sequence at the beginning of the movie because it breaks down exactly how everything works and how it flows and how their agency functions. They get the visions out of the psychic ones. They put it on like a really weird computer screen. They break down the details. They go, and yay, verily, they're successful, air quotes, in stopping this murder from happening. And they put
just
the guy away.
Barely, too.
Which is, you got to have the tension and the excitement. And Tom Cruise has to have a reason to be at a full sprint for at least 5 minutes of runtime in every movie that he's in. So he had to sprint through the building, and it was very important to get that scene in. What happens...
And it also had to feel so inevitable. Like there had to be no ambiguity in the mind of the viewer that this bad thing was going to happen.
And this is kind of the key question that the movie brings up for the next part, because then later on we're starting to see that Pre-Crime is looking to be adopted. Right now it's only in DC, and they're looking at taking it nationwide. And the Attorney General is in on it. There's going to be like a referendum. There's going to be a national vote. And there's a lot at stake for this program. And so everybody's looking at it with this microscope, and there's this investigator from the Department of Justice that's asking the hard questions, like, is this system actually perfect? And we're putting away people that have not actually committed any crimes, so how does that work? Well, the chief of this Pre-Crime unit, which is our hero, Tom Cruise, John Anderton in the movie, is dead set like, this is it. This is the solution to all of our problems. It's great. It's fantastic. Then the lights go off and they start getting other vision, and that opens up case 1109. And what we see is 36 hours ahead of time, the vision of our protagonist, the chief of Pre-Crime, killing a person that he has never met in his life. And so now, according to the dictates of the program that he is dead sworn to protect and uphold, he needs to arrest himself and go to prison forever. But he's convinced, like, I don't even know who that is. There's no way I'm ever going to do this. And then thus begins this action-y sequence where he's on the lam in this high-tech society, running from this thing that seems that he's convinced is inevitable, but he's trying to prove that it's not, because how could it ever be? And it goes down this rabbit hole, and he starts discovering all the different ins and outs of this program and the dirty secrets that got it built in the first place. And I don't want to spoil the ending, but it is an excellent, like, they take...
Why don't you want to spoil the ending? So we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of this movie. It came out in 2002.
Okay, fine. So what we discover is that the chief, the person that actually implemented this system in the first place, actually abused a loophole at the beginning of it in order to kill a person that was going to topple the whole system. These precogs were children of drug addicts that had gone away and were like off missing people or whatever. But one of them surfaced. One of the parents had cleaned herself up and she wanted her child back. And so this guy needed her out of the picture or else his whole system isn't going to work. And so he figured out a way that he could kill this woman in such a way that the system ignored it and thought it was just another revisit of a previously taken care of vision. And so this is what John Adderton discovers while he's trying to figure out like how the system could be flawed. He's looking for flaws in the system now because he doesn't want to go to jail forever because he's not going to kill a guy that he never met. So as he's digging for these problems, he finds this secret, which then kind of topples the whole thing. Like he does eventually overcome adversity. He gets the word out. Everybody finds out that the person who set this program up in the first place is a murderer, and presumably it doesn't go forward, but we don't know that for certain.
Yeah. So I love that you pointed out the really tight narrative structure of this film, and I think it's one of the brilliant things about it. In the first 10 minutes of the film, they introduce you to the magic system. They show you how everything works. They teach you all the rules of it. They make our protagonist to be a complete believer in the system, and then everything gets turned on its ear because now we have to follow the rules of the system we just learned for our protagonist, who now is guilty of a crime that he didn't commit, basically. And this is a great example of a noir, film noir, which is a term that means kind of a dark crime-based film where there's betrayals and it's a bit gritty, and they were really going for this when they filmed it. Spielberg had the cinematographer film it on this kind of film stock that makes it appear grainy and dark, and they used some processes when they developed it, made it look washed out. And
that was on purpose because
yeah.
I mean it looked so bad that I knew it had to be deliberate, but I didn't know it was like vintage terrible.
Yeah, it was supposed to look that way. And it had, so it's set in the year 2054, which is one of the brilliant strokes of this thing. I don't know if we've talked about it specifically on this podcast before, but in the year 1985, Back to the Future 2 came out that was in the year 2015, 30 years in the future. And they had all these ideas about rehydrating pizzas and flying cars and all those kinds of things. It was fun. And when the year 2015 came around, the most unrealistic thing in there was probably that the Cubs won the World Series.
Oh, come on. They had flying cars and nobody rehydrates pizzas.
Yeah, but, in our lifetimes, we will reach the year when this thing was. So let's just take a minute and talk about the technology of the movie Minority Report.
So I'm glad you brought this up because I want to nitpick it. Whenever you have a movie that's set in the not distant future, but near enough future that presumably people could live to see it, you have to base everything on technology. You have to have you have to be able to trace the archaeology of the technology in the movie to things that we currently have.
Yeah.
Because it's a backwards thing. Because people that are making the movie today have to take a vector of all right, where is technology right now? Where is it going? What will it look like 50 years from now? And what I found one of the most interesting things was back in 2002, there were no giant tablet smartphones that we carry around that have the sum of all human knowledge.
It was conspicuous.
And that is so evident in the movie because you see people putting your phone's ringing and it's this tiny little Bluetooth earpiece that they put in. And that's your phone. And then there's people multiple times in the movie, you see people reading a paper and every article in the paper is animated. And then at one point it changes with updated news. And I my wife pointed out this obviously came out before tablets were a thing because
right.
Why would anybody on Earth buy a newspaper when you have a tablet?
Okay, so is this the aspect of the movie you texted me that this film did not age well?
That was one of the aspects. Is just the technology was so out. I don't know. That's guessed,
just one aspect, though. You're right. They guessed that smart paper was going to become a thing and just threw all their eggs in that basket because smartphones weren't a thing and tablets weren't a thing.
Yeah. They just took the technology they had at the time. Phones are getting smaller. Phones are going to continue to get smaller. Biometrics are going to be a thing. No, when I said that, it was an all-encompassing statement about a ton of different things in this movie, and we can do
there's a lot they got right.
There's a lot they got right, but there's a lot that you're watching it this would never happen in America ever. For example, there were iris or retinal scanners literally everywhere for no reason. Like, there were billboard ads that would scan the irises of people walking past and customize the advert for that person.
Oh, okay. Okay, but give the movie a pass on this one. Here's why. Underlying the idea of biometric scanners everywhere scanning everyone's retinas is more of the idea that we are actually coping with today, that I thought was very prescient of the movie, of what if they have our identity and our location everywhere we go. And even though the movie got it wrong how they got that, it's actually true. You're carrying think of all the controversy we've heard recently about things like Facebook and selling our personal data and stuff like that. And any website you go to is trying to sell you stuff based on what you bought before.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and we can draw a lot of parallels there, but the fact of the matter is it's still a choice when you give up that information. There are people that will go buy a flip phone that don't have any Google subscriptions, and they have the ability to opt out of it.
That was a very dystopian aspect of this universe, that just involuntarily everywhere they went, they were just subject to being bombarded by personalized advertisements and giving up their location and all those kinds of things.
At one point, they thought our protagonist was on the lam and he was hiding in this tenement building. And so this pre-crime unit walked in and on the loudspeaker said, "We think somebody that is in this building is going to commit a crime. So we are going to send drones into every one of your houses and they are going to scan your identity against your will, and we do not have a warrant." That is what they said.
Oh, yeah. It was supposed to be shocking.
Yes, and like everybody in the building just let it happen. Like,
they just had to submit themselves to this unwarranted seizure of their personal identity.
And it's not like these robots were unintrusive. Like, they would come up and like, "Oh, please let me scan your eye." They would tase you if you resisted.
Yeah, and that scene is brilliant. The way it was filmed, the way it was executed, I love that scene. It's iconic.
I appreciate that that is a unique scene in all of cinematography, in that they took one whole floor of this tenement building, they took the ceiling off of it, and they moved the camera in one take without any cuts from room to room to room to show the impact these robots were having on the lives of these citizens. And that one little shot was excellent, but that could never happen in America. That level of police state just can't exist here.
Yeah, well, it's the proverbial frog being boiled to death. Can you see a line from where we're at now, where technically we have control over how much of our privacy we want to give up to the government, but we could turn it off if we wanted to the year 2054? Do you think we'd be at a place where we just were resigned to the fact that we couldn't object at all?
Yes, I can see that happening. That has happened in history. Like, there are places in the world now where that happens, but this country, the way that we are, I don't. That vector doesn't track out that way, I don't think.
So there was a lot of the police stuff. They had the jump ship and the jetpacks and the six sticks and the sonic gun and the spider drones and the bind foam.
Thank you for bringing this up, because I wanted to point out that Pre-Crime is a case study in government waste. Like, everything about that organization is ridiculous. Just ridiculous.
They lived in this palace of a building.
Thank you for... That's the first thing. The first shot we see, they're walking into this Pre-Crime, and it's supposed to be futuristic and awesome. Ben, you look around, it's all ramps. That entire room has one office and, like, all ramps, the rest of it. Like, yeah. The only way that they can possibly justify owning that building is if it was previously an art gallery and they got a smoking deal on it. Because none of that is usable space, first of all. And then they're so... Okay, at one point they're chasing John. They're like, "All right, let's strap him on." And then they have jetpacks. Ben, these cops have jetpacks, which, yes, it led to an interesting action scene. But how much did those cost? Let's talk about the property damage in the opening scene, the first case. All right, listen to me. Look at me when I'm telling you this. You remember, they dropped into the park. Like, they have this hovercraft thing, and they all came down off of their zip lines into a park. First of all, why? But that's fine. We'll hand wave that. They're all standing there like, crap, all these buildings look the same. Which one is he in? And then through some trickery, our Tom Cruise figures out who it is, and they say, no, he left his door open. And Tom Cruise goes sprinting off into the building, and he runs up the stairs, and he barely stops it just in time. Ben, he's there by himself. He gets in the building, he goes up the stairs, he stops the guy by himself. What is the next thing that happens?
They crash through the skylight on their jetpacks.
Those 8 other cops standing around in the park doing nothing, they loaded back up into the hovercraft so they could zip line down through the ceiling. Then there's shattered glass everywhere. And so what do? It's like, oh, here are the victims. They are 2 scantily clad people that were just having relations in the bed. Let us throw them down onto the shattered glass and protect them with our bodies. Like, these are the worst cops ever.
All right. And you get to know these cops over the course of the film. I want to talk about something in particular about what you're mentioning here. And that is, if you had a police unit now, their job is to enforce the law, but most of the time they're investigating a law that's already been broken. And there's something really profound here about the idea of being able to see a law that will be broken in the future, and you have a mandate to prevent it. Particularly in this case, we're only talking about murder. So
very high stakes. I get that.
Yes, that's it. It's the stakes are so high. Like for a cop, if he says, "Hey, all I got is this classic Chevy Caprice. Like it can only go 0 to 60 in 10 seconds. I want a Ford Mustang that can go 0 to 60 in 6 seconds." You'd be like, "What do you need that extra 4 seconds for?" But in this case, it's like, yeah, in that extra 4 seconds, I could stop a murder. All right, we'll get you a jump ship and some jetpacks.
Honestly, I can actually get behind that line of thinking. I will start to nitpick the fact that hovercraft is the stupidest designed hovercraft of all time.
Yeah, I watched all the bonus features on the DVD where they talk about all the art design behind it. It was really just,
they
fanciful whimsy. Yeah.
They backward designed it. Oh, we wanted something that looks cool, and we figured out how it worked later. Because I was watching, there's one scene, there's only, like, every time they get out of the thing, they're all dropping simultaneously from zip lines that don't physically fit.
But there's one scene where you see it from the front and they come out on like a carousel.
Yes, you see them actually in the seats, and it's this big circular interior, and they're sitting on seats that rotate around the outside of the circle, which means that inside of the ship there is this giant hollow space that's useless, and there's nothing there.
It doesn't hold up.
There's no stairs anywhere in this movie. Like, there are no stairs. Everything's ramps. In 2054, stairs will not be a thing. We've all gotten too fat. We hate stairs. Ramps everywhere.
All right, let's talk about some of the softer technological things here. There was also a designer drug. There was some high-tech botany. We're able of transplanting eyeballs. These are also, I think, good technological jumps to assume that we'll make in the next 50 years.
Okay, so let's break these down one at a time. Let's talk the medical technology. So at one point, John has to get his eyes replaced because, as we talked about, in this ridiculous Nazi police state, like, you can't go anywhere without having your iris.
He needs to see, but your retinas are going to get scanned.
Yes, so he needs new retinas, and not just new retinas. The guy explains in detail. We can't just replace your retinas. We got to replace your whole eyeball because the scanners will see the scar tissue. And so, like, the first time we're introduced to this character, he comes on scene sneezing with a bunch of grossness coming out of his face. And then our protagonist is notably, like, wary because the guy's about to operate on his head. And he goes, "Oh, don't worry. With the antibiotics I'm going to shoot you up with, I could sew a dead cat into your chest and you wouldn't get an infection." So first of all, medical technology has gotten to the point where we can have ridiculous invasive surgeries in a seedy hotel without really any ramifications.
Yeah. Again, there, like you said, just like the ship, it was the same level of hand waviness. It just high-tech something in the future. Okay, got it. Like, I'm willing to suspend my disbelief for the sake of the story. The part of that scene that really got me was that over the course of him getting this surgery, which was really haphazard and slapdash, if you ask me, that it comes out that they have a past relationship, a police-criminal relationship, and John apparently had sent this guy to jail previously. And I could not, for the life of me, figure out if they established anywhere in that scene, and I've seen it a dozen times, why he was willing to help John so completely. Because he didn't just help him a little bit, he helped him a lot.
Okay. This is something I noticed.
He did the surgery. He did a good job at it. He prepared him for the future. He served as Q, like in a James Bond movie, where he's giving him gadgets he was going to need down the line.
For no reason. At one point, John asks when he's coming out of the surgery, "How do I go to the bathroom?" And there's a cut. Like, there is a jump cut that implies that the guy set this system up like ad
Yeah,
hoc
we
right
tied
before him.
strings all over this room you've never been to before.
It's like, okay,
so you can go to.
this one is for the bathroom. This one's for the kitchen. Good little boy. Like, pat his head and like, oh, you're such a good boy. Oh, you're
And
such
we
a
made you
good
a
boy.
sandwich in the fridge and just all this stuff.
So, all right, what you're talking about is a symptom of a much larger problem, in that this movie has the weirdest characters for no reason. And I'm gonna give you 3 pieces of evidence for this. Okay.
Okay.
The first really weird character is his drug dealer that we see.
Okay.
It's a random guy.
The drug dealer that's missing both his eyeballs.
That is somehow super philosophical. And even though he's clearly blind, still has a successful and booming drug industry.
Okay. These are characteristics of a noir, but go on.
Okay. The next one is our doctor, who is a freak show in every sense of the word, and somehow super
he has
helpful.
a Russian accent and this weird past, and he helps John anyway, even though John sent him to jail.
The third character that is a complete nut
And didn't
job.
pay him enough.
Underpaid him, and still he got extra bonuses out of it. What a nice guy. I guess it was pro bono work from the street doc that's barely surviving. The third character is the lady, the
Rufus T.
geneticist.
Riley. Oh, Iris Heineman.
Yes, who is the geneticist or the scientist or the smart woman that was able to extract this ability or refine it in these precognitive people in the first place, who is genetically altering plants, like completely against every law about genetic engineering that exists on her property. Like he was scratched by one of her sentient moving vines on his way in. And he was
totally buggered.
He was going to die if she wasn't in the greenhouse at that moment to make him the herbal tea to save his life.
Yeah.
But like, now I understand, like, we're going to set her up as the smart person that has all of this information. But at one point randomly in that scene, like, she leans in to whisper this secret into his ear that does not need to be whispered because there's nobody for miles. And then then this old lady kisses him on the mouth like a complete psychopath. So we have a character who could have just been
supposed to come across like that.
This person had the potential of just being like the hero's journey mentor or the person with the information you need to progress the plot line. Yeah. And they made the deliberate decision to make her a complete freak.
Creepy and weird, not just the wise one.
I have a theory, and if you watch this movie again, pay attention to the camera angles. Whenever there is this weird freak show person who we're not sure why they're doing the things that they're doing or if they're real, the camera is always a little weird, or there's always a little lens flare. Oh, our prison guard, who is a paraplegic.
Yeah, Gideon.
He's a paraplegic that, again, wasteful law enforcement agency somehow requisitioned a pipe organ for his office in the prison. Not a keyboard.
His office was crazy. It had like it was weird.
Like, I could see him having a keyboard to play while he's toiling away the hours.
No, a full pipe organ.
A full pipe organ. And whenever he's on camera, he's also just a little skew and there's a little lens flare. Like, he's not all right in the head either. And the things he says are just off. There are multiple characters that we see in this movie. The camera depicts them as, this is a weirdo. Now, that never happens with the wife, with John's wife, whose name
Laura.
Escapes me. Never happens with Laura. And it does not happen with the chief of pre-crime until we find out he's the bad guy. And then now all of a sudden all of his camera angles are screwed up and there's lens flare behind him.
Yeah, in the special features, there's a lot of interviews with the cinematographer, and I'm sure he was behind all this that you're talking about. All right. That was an interesting tangent. I enjoyed it. So we were kind of going down the technologies. I think I'd exhausted all the ones I'd written down that I want to talk about. I mean, there's all the computing things with the hand manipulated visual interfaces, which made for great cinematography. I got to say that. Like, even though we're probably not headed to that path, we're going to wear gloves and wave around images in the air. It really made for an interesting thing as opposed to like an episode of NCIS where there's like jamming on the keyboard and enhance. Like, no, this was really cool.
No, I can see that happening. If we get to the point where we have three-dimensional displays with like some kind of tactile feedback, I can see hand gestures used to manipulate data in 3 dimensions like that.
Especially if you're scrubbing through video feeds.
Yes. Now, I want to bring this up because I thought this was really hilarious. Is in that room, he's like, I got driver's licenses for our possible victim. All right, put them on my screen. Okay. And he takes out a tablet, like a clear slate of glass, and he pushes it into his computer. and he slides everything over onto it, and he takes that out of the computer, and he walks to the other side of the room, and he puts that into this computer, and then he pulls the files off. But then later in the movie, hang on.
Was
later,
the center console supposed to be isolated, like air gapped?
But here's the thing. Later in the movie, he's working on the same console, and John says, like, oh, he needs this now. And he hits a button, and that movie starts streaming on some screen across town that guy could not have any access to regardless whatsoever. So we have the technology to digitally transfer these files, but we just don't want to. We want to haul it across the room physically.
They were a bit enamored with their little techno gadgets, and one of them was those little, tablets and little quarter-sized things that they were storing image files on, and it was an impressive idea of the future that we would have little discs or things, but really we've gone past that to where it's all just stored in the cloud somewhere, someone else's computer.
And I get, like, it is a cool idea, and I honestly would appreciate, like, a thumb drive that had a screen on it where I could swipe through the things that were on the thumb drive, which is basically what these things were. But it just didn't make any sense for moving data from one side of the office to the other.
All right, so you pointed out a few things in the technology you think they got wrong. I think they kind of caught the spirit of where they were going, maybe if they didn't get all the details right. But one that I saw that I was just like, no, this completely doesn't work. So they took the future and kind of laid it onto Washington, D.C. so that you could still recognize Washington, D.C., but it still looked a bit futuristic. Like, yeah, there's a Washington Monument in the Capitol, but there's also these maglev autonomous vehicles going up and down the sides of buildings.
Let's talk about the cars that would be responsible for tens of thousands of deaths a year.
Yeah, well, okay, but they were fully automated. There was smart paper and those kinds of things. But there was this scene where he was scrubbing the video, and he was trying to figure out where there was a little boy behind one of the people involved in the murder, where he was behind him on one side and then behind on the other, and he realized that the child was on a merry-go-round. And I would like to say that is utterly and completely unrealistic, and there's no way there will be any merry-go-rounds left in the United States of America in the year 2054.
I believe that. They are a liability nightmare. Like, people die on merry-go-rounds every year.
No chance.
Here's a tangent. We were at a family reunion for my wife's family in California a couple of years back. And we were walking around Ojai, California, just because my wife grew up there. And there was this little pocket park that had this playground, and there was a bunch of kids playing on it. And my kids got up on this. It was a big merry-go-round. This was like a 10-foot diameter, big old merry-go-round.
All right.
And the idea is that I think the engineer intended that it would just be too heavy for a child to build up the angular momentum necessary to, like, get it to dangerous velocity. But this engineer did not take into account the 250-pound grown man that wanted to spin this thing as fast as possible for his children.
Holy crap.
So my kids jump on this thing, and there was already 3 or 4 other kids. Like, okay, everybody ready? Everybody hang on. And I started trying to spin this giant merry-go-round as fast as I could. And everybody was laughing and having a great time until inevitably one kid goes flying off like 5 or 6 feet, rolled, and then hit like a concrete wall on the outside of the of the wood chips.
You were the one spinning it when this happened?
Oh yes, I was completely responsible for the amount of energy that this kid ran into this wall with. So yes, I agree. There's no chance that those will survive the legal ramifications until 2050.
Okay, so we've waxed philosophical about all the technology and whether or not it will exist in year 2054. I think this movie will be like Back to the Future 2 was, where we will reach the year, we'll remember this film, and we'll have those discussions about did we or didn't we realize these things. I hope by that time we do have automated cars. But let's move on from the technology to the concept of pre-crime.
Okay, let's talk about, can you predict the future perfectly? And if you can, what are the ramifications of that?
So one of the things that that's woven throughout this story is the idea of it being almost a theology, that you have to believe, you have to have faith in the idea that these 3 people floating in this milk in the bottom of this temple, they call it, which was a very deliberate theological reference, are seeing the certain future, and if we act based on that knowledge, we can prevent a murder.
Yes, what they are seeing is not a future, not a possibility, but the future. Like the operating assumption that they are working under is that what they see is, yea, verily, signed and sealed, delivered, the truth.
Yeah, and they show an ad on one of their television like cross references where they just say, back 6 years ago when pre-crime was first tested, in the first month murder was reduced by 90%, and now for the past 6 years there have been 0 murders in the District of Columbia. On the surface, that sounds great.
Yes.
Like DC has one of the highest per capita murder rates in the nation.
Yes. I have a hard time believing that this pre-crime unit, as over budgeted as it is, these 8 people would have a hard time stopping drive-by shootings. They would have trouble stopping like any kind of large-scale gun battle between organized criminals. Like presumably everything that they're dealing with is like one-on-one, I'm going to kill you. But there's a lot of different kinds and flavors of murder that happen, Ben.
Yeah, and this movie was wisely not distracted by those kinds of tangents. It was focused on John Anderton.
Yes. And so
Anne Lively.
We're introduced to a character very early on, and that is Colin Firth's character, Danny, which is ridiculous that he has an Irish accent. His name is Danny. But
Danny Whitwer.
Yeah, Danny Whitwer, because John Anderton calls him out and derogatorily calls him Danny Boy at one point, which is hilarious but inappropriate.
Well, you know that Colin Farrell's an Irish actor, right?
I'm aware of that. Yeah, he is an Irish guy. Yeah, I know. I get it.
But he wasn't supposed to have an Irish accent. He was supposed to sound like he was just from New Jersey or something.
Yeah, he was distinctly Irish because he is. Like, you don't hire him unless you want somebody portrayed as Irish.
Yeah.
Anyway, like they when you're talking about the theological aspect, they made him like he was 3 years into his seminary before he got into law enforcement. Like they deliberately they inserted a character to put the theological implications front and center.
Agreed. There was a scene where he was about to fight Anderton, and he pulls out his rosary beads and kisses him before he started the fight. Don't
get me started on the magic appearing and disappearing rosaries that that Danny character kept pulling out, because there was a scene where he was later in the movie shot by our actual antagonist, and he's like,
I got you started.
Completely empty hands, gets shot, hits the wall, slides down, rosary not in his hand but wrapped around his fingers, like he'd been there the whole time.
Yeah.
Ugh. That like 4 times that happens.
All right, so we kind of got off on a tangent, but I want to go back to pre-crime. So from the outside, from the commercial aspect of it, from the fact that the Attorney General wants it and Congress is getting ready to approve it going nationwide, it looks great. You took the highest per capita murder district in the nation, you applied this system to it, and you reduced murder to 0, and it stayed that way for 6 years. By any measure, that's a success.
So long as you ignore 2 facts. One is brought up by our Danny Whitmore, and he says, like, you're arresting people technically for crimes that they've never committed. And then John Anderton does his fun little thing where he takes the ball and he throws it across the desk, and it's rolling, and it comes off, and then Colin Firth catches it. I say Colin Firth. Is it Colin Firth or Colin Farrell?
Firth.
Okay. Danny.
Sorry.
Danny catches the ball.
Danny Whitwer.
Danny Whitwer catches the ball, and then like Tom Cruise looks at me and goes, "Why did you catch that?" Because it was going to fall. But it didn't. You stopped it. Just because you prevented it from happening doesn't mean it wasn't going to happen. So this is kind of the premise that the entire thing is built off of. That these things are
wrapped up in a neat little package. This is what we do.
Yes.
Here in pre-crime.
That
was before Johnny Anderton found out he was the next ball coming.
Okay, I keep dragging us down these tangents, but technically he still killed the guy. Like, the guy is dead. Like, he was there holding the gun. Like, yeah, he might not. It might have been manslaughter, but he's still responsible for the death of that person. Never mind. We'll get away from that. The second aspect they bring up that you have to ignore in this whole aspect is that these 3 precogs are people that they are keeping in basically chemically induced comas in a pool. That's slavery. Period.
Yes. Let's talk about this for a while. So from the outside, it looks great. Like, hey, we've come up with this system. We have these precogs. Outside, they have these nice statues that look like regular human beings that are standing upright with their hands out like they're giving a gift to the world. But really, they're absolutely, totally, and utterly completed to the point where the analogy you just drew of slavery is not at all inappropriate.
Well, John Anderson even says specifically out loud, like, it's better if you don't think of them as people.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So we're exploiting the precogs. We're taking away the free will of the accused, even though they haven't actually committed a crime. As the story starts to go on, there turns out to be corruption surrounding the protection of the momentum this thing has, because they recognize, similar to like automated cars, that if something goes wrong in this system and people lose faith in it, the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah, every piece has to be completely and perfectly defensible.
And then you have an all-powerful police force that is that is given the authority to enforce control over people for things they haven't done.
Which is terrifying when you think about it, because so there, in our first example, case 1108, the crime of passion, like John Anderton literally caught the guy's hand with the murder weapon as it was descending to stab his wife to death.
Right.
That's one scenario. The other scenario is they were going to arrest John Anderton and put him into jail forever, 36 hours before he was going to commit this crime.
Yeah.
And this is what drives me nuts about this, is Tom Cruise's character is such a narcissistic jerk that he can't... If he had just left town, if he had just driven to Baltimore and stayed in a hotel for 4 days, he doesn't go to jail now. He proved the entire system falls to pieces.
Okay, it's time to go down this tangent. This, at the heart of this, is something that's existed for a long time in the theological community. It's the debate of predestination versus free will. Like, how much choice do you even have over your own actions? Now, let's go way, way back to the story of Oedipus Rex. You're familiar with that story, right?
He kills his own father and sleeps with his mother?
Yes. But he doesn't know it's his mother. But if you remember at the very beginning of that story, there's some type of oracle or prophecy. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, he was told that this was going to happen, and then he left deliberately to try to avoid these circumstances. And in
trying to avoid it, he sets up the chain of events that causes it to come to pass.
Right. And our psycho old lady molester person even said those words. And he's like, where's my Minority Report? I'm not going to kill this guy. I never met him. And yet here you are on this inevitable chain of events that's going to lead to that murder.
And even Danny Whitworth says it at some point. They're like, well, we still got to find him. We got to stop him. They're like, we've seen the future. He's in the room and he's got the precog with him, yet she's still down there. Somehow he's got to get her out. That's where we need to go.
And that funny, like he says that 30 seconds after John Anderton broke into that room. Oh, I another tangent. I have to do it. Like, they escaped that room. Like, they locked him down. There's no way out. They're not going to get out of there. And he pulled like an emergency flush handle.
The flush handle.
Which was a 3-foot wide pipe in the center of the pool that flushed out. Ah, dang, they got away. My wife pointed out...
Where does that go? Who knows?
My wife pointed out, it's like, man, it's a good thing sewers in the future don't have stuff like grates or pipes with no air. Like, because they would just be corpses somewhere in the sewer system.
Yeah. It was necessary. They had plot armor on.
Oh, please. There was a jump cut and they were in a car completely dry. That was ridiculous.
Yeah, but that led to my favorite scene in the whole movie. I love that scene where he gets her out. She's she's huddled up in the car and she's looking out the window and she goes, "Is it now?" He's like, "What?" She's like, "I'm tired of the future."
Well, and that scene is profound for a couple of reasons. One, like, she's been in a coma for so long that she shouldn't be able to talk.
They've been forcing her to live in this world where she just watches murders nonstop.
Yeah, and then him recognizing Tom Cruise did a good job in that moment of making it realize John Anderton is realizing that this is a person in the car next to me.
I was hand waving this away. I was saying it's better if you don't think of them as people, and she's a person.
Yeah, that was important.
And I like that that's really it. I think that's the fundamental question that this movie's asking us. If there were a way that we could completely do away with murder and all we had to do was enslave people and take away people's free agency, wouldn't that be a better world to live in?
Ben, you're phrasing this like a utilitarian equation, like I'm going to disagree with it. Because I'm going to tell you right now... No, of course not. You'd be a monster to do any such thing. But then the question always descends to, well, what if it was just one person? What if you could save X people with X divided by Y people? And then everybody's math on that is going to be different. But the bottom line is, from a moral perspective, it is unacceptable at any level.
So I thought that these precogs, they named them Agatha, Dashiell, and Arthur, which interestingly are literary references to Agatha Christie, Dashiell Hammett, and Arthur Conan Doyle, who are all famous crime authors.
Funny how authors will reference other authors in their authorly works.
Yeah. It kind of reminded me of The Island. Did you see that film where there was like this group of people that were like genetic replicas of the people
like
that
clones
lived above?
of rich people that were just like organ farms.
Yeah, or Snowpiercer, where they just live in the back of the train and they're just there if they need to spare parts or whatever.
A ridiculously bad Chris Evans movie. Yes.
or even Total Recall. There's just this idea that I've heard it expressed in terms of like organ donation. If you just want to look at things strictly from a utilitarian point of view, a single living person has enough organs in them that you could take them apart and give all their organs to people and save 10 lives. So like, why don't we do it?
China does do that. There's a booming illegal black market for organs. And if you need an organ, go to China.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm talking about in the strict sense where we're actually just killing someone because it has more utilitarian use.
I understand what you're saying, but you can't enforce utilitarianism on other people. This is the problem. Like, yes, we can all, at certain levels, we can all fundamentally agree that A is better than B. However, if you have to remove freedoms from people to implement A, then it is fundamentally flawed and untenable.
And that was it. That was the central conflict at the heart of this whole system of pre-crime. That at the heart of it were three individuals that had been identified as having these abilities to see the future, and that in order for this system to work, they had to be enslaved against their will and kept in a drug-induced coma. And the system would only last as long as they were able to continue doing this.
You're saying that like this was the central tenet, like this was the central moral argument, but that was not the central question that the film kept referring to and kept bringing up.
What do you think it was?
The central question was, and what caused all the conflict is, are the precogs right all the time? Is our fundamental assumption that the prediction of the future is correct? Because that is what literally John Anderton was fighting against the entire time. I am not going to kill this guy, and I'm going to prove it by staying here somehow. Like he had a really stupid line of decision making, but like he was going to try to prove his innocence by breaking down and showing and proving that no, what they can see can be wrong.
Right. I liked it. I know what you said is the natural thing. Oh, well, if I'm going to kill that guy, I'm just going to run as far away as I can. Oh, look, 36 hours later, I'm still in the situation as predicted. But I just did something boring for the day and a half. No. It was way better that was this way.
We had to have Tom Cruise at full sprint for 5 minutes at least on film. Like, that's in his contracts. So
exactly.
He was just literally sprinting from one terrible scenario to another, and then his hyper-competence would get him out of it.
Now, one thing he had that the other people that had been arrested by the pre-cops never did is the knowledge. He got to watch the video of him murdering someone. This changed the equation.
And this is funny because if you remember the last scene, I love this last scene because it's such a hypocritical moment for our protagonist. Because what he's doing is he sets up this scenario and he broadcasts the video of the guy who's in charge of the pre-crime unit, like murdering this person. And so he's bringing the whole system down. And then at the end, they're on the balcony and John is explaining to him, so you're stuck. Either you can kill me and go away forever, but that will prove that the precogs are right because they saw this murder because the guys are on their way to arrest you right now. And that's what he's been building him up for. So do it. You should kill me. Kill me now, like they said. And then he pulls the gun out and he goes, but you've seen the future, so you can change it. It's like John had this moment where he's like, oh, crap, he is actually going to kill me. And now he's trying to talk him back down. And that just drove me nuts. It's like, whatever. The idea there, he was in a corner. Either he kills John and then he goes away forever, or he doesn't kill John and the entire pre-crime...
And the whole system collapses.
The whole system collapses because the fundamental argument is flawed. Because the idea there is, if you know your future, now you have the agency and the free will to change it. So really, pre-crime could be completely replaced by a call center of, hey, just going to let you know, you're going to kill somebody in 36 hours, so stop it. So don't. just stop killing people. And
honey, who was on the phone? I don't know, it's just a spam call.
it's just another one of those. Just another one of those telemarketers. I think I'm gonna go see our parents for the weekend. It's like, yeah, no, it's fine. Don't ask questions.
Now, there's something that they just kind of hand wave away, but they also wanted to give it a feeling of a bit of due process, where whenever they would initiate the process of reviewing the video, they would call up 2 witnesses.
Yes. They had some chief justice and some doctor lady.
Yeah, because basically they're inferring that an entire democratic process had to occur in this moment. It reminded me very much of Judge Dredd, of that world where we just, in the future, there's just no time for actual due process. So we're going to put the entire judge, jury, and executioner all into one person.
And this is, they kind of, like you said, they hand wave everything in this movie. But one of the things that they did was, once like your name showed up on the ball of the killer, you were already convicted. Like that was it. The summation of your due process was completely
no question.
waived.
That was the faith aspect of this.
In reality, if this was a thing that was actually implemented, I think those people that they caught would go to jail, and there would still be a trial of, this is what was predicted, this is the situation we found this person in, and then you would have to argue it out. Like, and that would just be like the precog's like vision, like the video of that person brutally killing his wife, sleeping with the dude, is just, exhibit A.
Right. But he didn't actually do it. Now, then it's over. Like, especially for the ones they said that all they had left were the crimes of passion. Like, if you take them out of the moment of passion, it's you've done it. Yeah. Success.
Talk them down.
You don't need to keep them. You don't need to keep them in suspended animation. So let's talk about that for a minute, because that's another technological leap they made. Is that they could apprehend these people, put some type of halo on them that puts them in a dreamlike state. And now they no longer, I don't know, they don't biologically age. Like what was the plan? They never really talked about it.
So my understanding of that was, they, like you said, they just kind of put them in a coma. Like they're just dreaming now. So their body is biologically alive and just doing its normal biological processes, but they're just not able to wake up or move or do anything. And so they just have them, which is the weirdest freaking thing. They put them.
It was like they didn't know yet what they wanted to do with them. Just wait over here in the corner for a minute until we figure out what we're going to do about this.
So let's think, because it doesn't make sense at any level, because the idea of prison is punishment because it's taking away your time. But if you're just in a dream the entire time you're in prison, you're going to wake up feeling like you slept for a long time, and it's going to have been 20 years, but like you just fell asleep. Like, how much time do you feel has passed? Like, you're going to wake up the same person, just in a terrible, terrible future where all your friends are dead and you're a convicted felon.
So I want to talk about the Philip K. Dick story, because all the character names are the same, and the central plot was the same except for one key difference. So John Anderton was nearing retirement, and Danny Whitwer comes, and he's like going to replace John. And the mechanism that they used was different. It was like a computer generated a punch card that was like the artifact that was the equivalent of those little wooden balls with names on them.
Oh, God, we need to talk about those balls at some point, but go ahead.
Yeah. So he had the punch card, and it had his name on it, and that he was going to kill the Lamar Burgess character. Anyway, all the events and the running and stuff happens. His wife was actually one of the cops in the short story. But at the very end, he reaches the point where he has to decide, John Anderton has to decide, if he wants to go through with the murder to ensure that the system doesn't fall apart, to prove that the precogs were right, or not murder the guy and not take on the personal consequences for doing that.
That's interesting, because they put all the onus of decision back onto, like, if that happened in the movie, because that decision was on the ancillary character, the Burgess character,
Lamar Burgess,
that we didn't care about. It would have been much more profound if it had been on, well, I guess it did.
On John.
It kind of happened when John was in the hotel room and was supposed to kill Leroy Crow.
Yeah. I like that moment. I like that moment where John Anderson still thinks Leo Crow is the man who kidnapped and murdered his son, and he's staring down the barrel of a gun at him, and he takes a deep breath, and Tom Cruise is an excellent actor, and he really sounds like he just goes, "You have the right to remain silent."
But yeah, it's a struggle to get every syllable out instead of laying waste to this guy.
Yeah, just being like, I am using my ability to choose not to murder you. and let due process take its course.
Yeah.
It was profound. So yeah, that was the main difference between the short story and the movie. But I do like the fact that it did the switcheroo with two characters. Danny Whitwer, who we thought was potentially the one that was framing John because he wanted his job or he had it out for pre-crime or something like that. And Lamar Burgess, who looked like this benign mentor that we were vested in and trusted and stuff. And then there's a switcheroo at the end where actually Danny Whitwer was John's biggest ally, and Lamar Burgess was actually the malevolent force framing people and murdering innocent women. So let's talk about the Anne Lively murder for a second. So Anne Lively was Agatha's mother, and at some point she got clean from the drug, the Neuroin that she was addicted to, that caused her child to be born with birth defects, which gave her the abilities which caused pre-crime to be possible.
All of these dominoes that fell into place perfectly.
But she cleans herself up, comes back, says, "Okay, I want my daughter back. You've got to." She's one of the few people that actually knows that her daughter's locked up in a pool in the bottom of the pre-crime division. And Lamar's like, "Oh no, this will break the system. We can't do this without Agatha. I can't let her be had, and she's not going away."
Yeah, because for hand-wavy reasons, there has to be three of them, and Agatha is the strongest one and the most important, and blah blah blah.
Yeah. In the short story, they key in much more on the Minority Report aspect of this thing. That the three precogs are roughly equal, but they don't always see the same future, and that they just decide for whatever reason to only always go with whatever the majority agrees to do, even though there's a Minority Report.
Right. No, in the movie we need to focus on one because John Anderson's going to kidnap one of them, and we need to humanize them.
So at one point, Lamar Burgess is having one of those mentor moments with John Anderson, and he looks at him, he says, "John, we don't choose the things we believe in. They choose us." And that made me think of the book that we read about memetics.
The virus of the mind, yes. Like, you say that, and, like, you are totally infected. You are, like, the plague ship of the idea of pre-crime, sir.
Yeah.
That is funny. That's a good parallel to draw. And he sounded very profound saying that, but you're right. That just makes him sound very gullible. It's like, do you not think for yourself? Do ideas take control of you all the time? Like, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're craving a Wendy's cheeseburger, do you get up, get dressed, and go get one?
It's funny that you gave you kind of gave this facetious internet meme version of Tom Cruise that he always has to be filmed running for 5 minutes, but I bet there is a good 5 minutes worth of airtime of him running in this movie. But that's like the theme. It was on the posters. It was repeated like at least 6 times. He's teaching his son how to run. He says to the cops that are chasing him, "Everybody runs." Agatha yells to him, "Run." It's like one of the themes of the movie.
That scene, all right, there is a scene in the movie where Agatha's having this very quiet, like, loving moment in the house, talking about the child in the future that could have been.
An alternate future of their son, yeah.
And the entire time, like, it's such a soft and tender moment, and it's getting quieter and softer and coming in close. "But now it's time to run, John." And Tom Cruise goes, "What?" And then Agatha goes, "Run!" And she's screaming it at the top of her lungs. And during that scene, I knew it was coming. And so I'm sitting there creeping the volume down the whole time. My wife's like, "What are you doing? I can barely hear it." I'm like, "You'll thank me in a minute." And
had she never seen it before?
She had, but it'd been years and years and years.
Okay.
And so then, like, Agatha, like, I had cranked the volume to like half of what it was. And it was still stupid loud when she actually ended up yelling it. And my wife was like, "Oh my God, that was so loud." I'm like, "Yeah, I was creeping the volume down the whole time."
Yeah. There was one little tech thing that was just a throwaway, but right towards the end when he's got Agatha out of the temple and he needs to hack into her memories, he takes her to Rufus T. Riley, the creepy tech guy.
Yes.
And there's this whole black market of, like, virtual reality, hack into your mind, let you experience things kind of thing that's been explored better and more in other movies. But it led me down this path that there's a theory that exists that the ending we watched of Minority Report wasn't what really happened.
Oh, no, yeah, that Minority Report, like the whole second or the whole third act and the climax was just John's fevered dream while he's still standing in that pillar with the halo on.
Yes, that.
Well, it's just, this is that common theme that runs through this guy's intellectual property. I can't speak.
Philip Dick.
I haven't seen Blade Runner near enough long ago.
But you have seen Total Recall, and that's exactly what Total Recall is about.
Yeah, and Total Recall calls that out. It's like, oh, how do I know this is real? It's like, and he doesn't. Like, he could still be sitting in the chair experiencing the spy thriller vacation that he asked for. We don't know.
And the third act does have a noticeably different tone from the rest. It's light. It kind of lightens up, and it has a happy ending, and everyone is fine in the end. And John's wife that was estranged comes back. They start their family up again. The crime gets solved.
Again, like the pre-crime guys drop onto the balcony after Lamar Burgess shoots himself, and there's a corpse there, and they're all standing around John, and they like nudge him. And I want Fletcher to look up and be like, hey, remember that time that you committed all that property damage and beat the crap out of all of us and then escaped from prison after being sentenced for a crime? It's like, John is still a convicted criminal, and he's standing right there. This is not a hand-wavy, happily ever after moment. Like, there is problems that need to get resolved here.
Bygones are bygones, right, John? Yeah.
Fletch, the guy that took over for John after John went on the lam, at one point, like halfway through the movie, like the guy, Danny Boy asked him, it's like, what kind of law enforcement were you before this? And he goes, oh, it's Treasury. And like I said out loud, that makes sense. That's why he's awful at his job. He's not a real cop. This guy is a glorified bank security guard. No wonder he can't catch one guy.
Yeah. Well, but, just like in our career field, they didn't care what your college degree was.
Are we at the point yet where we get to nitpick all of the things that were just so stupid that made me want to beat my head into the wall about this movie?
Yeah, speed round. Go.
Speed round. Okay. So there's a clip in 30 Rock. I've talked about this before where they were making a movie. It was supposed to be a slasher movie, but they kept adding sponsors and changes to like increase the revenue generation. By the end, it was some sing-along happy family nonsense.
Yeah.
And then some outsider looked at it and goes, oh, this is awful. And then
it's testing really well with the focus group.
Oh, no, the other guy it was Alec Baldwin's character goes, oh, it doesn't matter. It's already made money. Like, I felt that way about this movie because I started counting all of the product placement that happened. Like, how many times was Lexus front and center? How many times was American Express front and center? How many times was Nokia front and center? How many times was...
That gets a big fat meh from me.
Bugatti. Like, no. Pepsi.
You know what I find more distracting is when we try to set up some film universe and they actually avoid product placement, like our lives aren't filled with actual products.
But if you go back and watch this movie again, it was bought and paid for 100%. That movie made a profit before it even hit theaters because there was so much freaking product placement in that.
Yeah. Okay. What else?
All right. In the car plant where he somehow has. All right. So first of all, he's running towards a car plant.
That was classic Steven Spielberg action scene. It reminded me of Indiana Jones. Just like a million death-defying feats that none of them made sense.
I'm talking. All right. There's a couple of things I want to point out. First of all, he runs into a sedan where Danny Boy is sitting in. Like, it's a sedan. It's a sedan, and he runs past it. And then we jump cut to the scene, and there's like 36 guys chasing him. Like, were they all in the sedan? Where did all of these 36 guys in suits come from? All right, so we'll hand wave that away. Next, he's on an assembly line, a fully automated assembly line for cars. Like, there's not a human in sight, and they're just building cars. This is the worst assembly line of all time when it comes to safety and detection of human life, because he almost died 19 times in 6 seconds when all these robot arms were like cramming stuff onto him. All right,
it was classic Steven Spielberg, just nonsense.
The car is in the paint tube. It's going down this tunnel and it's getting painted this arrest me red color. And Tom Cruise sits up, fires up the fully fueled or operational engine and drives it off into the distance. You know what, Ben? I'm going to hand wave that. If it's an electric car, maybe they stock it with charged batteries. Who cares? I'll let that go. What I will not let go is where the crap was the car going. Because when it comes out of the paint tunnel, it drives into a completely empty and pristine warehouse, and he drives out an open door. There's not a human in sight. There is not a delivery truck. There is not another vehicle that has been completed that day. There is nothing in this warehouse. Where was that car going, Ben? Who was going to pick up the car when it was done? All right, second. Again, pre-crime is terrible at their jobs. They were flying on the jetpacks, and they broke into like 2 apartments. They broke into one apartment flying on a jetpack and like lit everything on fire, and then then somehow inexplicably broke through the ceiling that people can walk on. There are beams that were engineers designed for people to support weight. They broke through it into somebody else's apartment, lit everything in there on fire. How much property damage do these people get to write off?
You missed one.
Oh, did I?
When they were flying up the outside of the building, there was a couple of construction workers on there, and it cuts away from them before you see the end of this, but they knock like 3 guys off the edge of the building, and they certainly fell 12 stories to their death.
Yes.
Why didn't that show up in the precogs?
John Anderton somehow broke out of one of these maglev cars as it's descending this impossible height at 60 or 70 miles an hour, jumps onto another moving car that's moving 60, 70 miles an hour that is a completely smooth surface that somehow he gets a grip on and does a pull-up over. And then it's going like 60 or 70 miles an hour, and he just jumps off and lands on somebody's balcony and gets up and walks away.
Are you done yet?
There are so many. Those were the biggest and most this one. He wanted to keep his old eyeballs so he could break in. It's like, I have to get new eyeballs or I'm not going to get within 10 miles of that building. But if I have my eyeball, I can scan it into the door that opens.
I want to point this out. And I'll give a nod to your wife as an HR person. What's the very first thing you do when you're going to dismiss somebody from their job? You go in all the computer systems, you suspend their account, lock their access so that when they're dismissed, they no longer have access to anything. Like this is in the year 2054, you think we'd have gotten better at corporate security by now. The very first thing they should have done is suspended John's biometric access to the inner sanctums of this building.
To everything.
Yeah.
And then he dropped, because his fingers are numb for some reason, he drops his eyeballs and they're rolling down the ramp because, like I mentioned earlier, in 2054, we don't believe in stairs anymore. So they're rolling away from him precariously. And he has to dive at the last moment and catch it before it falls through a sewer grate. And my wife speaks up and goes, "Oh, there are grates on sewers." Because then like 2 minutes later, he gets flushed down into the sewer and he's fine.
Awesome. I think that's a good one to end on. Let's talk about the magic system of Minority Report.
All right, so
I want to.
It breaks up into 2 different things, but obviously we have the technology and then the precog thing. So how do we want to go forward with that?
I don't think we need to. I don't think the technology was relevant for this storytelling. The story was separate from the technology. It was just an add-on after the fact.
I agree.
So it's just the precogs we're talking about.
So this is a good example of, because there are some movies that we've watched where there is a magic system like Star Wars and things where it exists parallel to the story. Like the story isn't about the magic system, and so it's kind of irrelevant and doesn't really play a major role. This one is not that way. The two are completely and perfectly intertwined in that if you believe in this magic system, here are the consequences, and that is the story that we are telling.
Yes, agreed. So you pointed out really well that the opening vignette where they demonstrate the capabilities and purpose of the pre-crime division, how it all works end to end, and then throw our protagonist right in the middle of that is exactly what happened. And I want to talk about how that follows Sanderson's laws. So let's review them because it's been a while. If some of our listeners aren't familiar with, we're going from science fiction fantasy author Brandon Sanderson. He has 3 laws, he says, regarding use of magic systems in storytelling. First law is an author's ability to solve a conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. So in this case of the precogs, I think they do a pretty good job of making sure that we understand how it works. The rules are that the precogs can see about 4 days out. They only see murder. Sometimes they don't all see the same thing. And there are echoes that the technicians might delete, and that's when that happens, maybe, yeah. But we know the rules pretty well.
Yes, it is,
and they stick to the rules.
It is extremely hand wavy, and like not much of it makes sense. For example, why do they only see murders? Oh, because that's the worst thing somebody could do to another person. Like, are you sure? I've heard that rape is pretty bad, but we're going to hand wave that away for the purpose of the story. For Sanderson's first law, I think they do an excellent job of, we as an audience understand what is at stake, what is happening, and why it's happening as far as what the precogs can and can't do.
So the second law is the limitations of a magic system are more interesting than its capabilities. And what this law is pointing out is that they allow the restrictions to exist rather than just coming up with excuses to break them. And I think that's also true here.
Yes, once we get past the initial assumptions and premises, like internal to the movie, they don't break a lot of their own rules, and they're not introducing a lot of new concepts to expand it. They're just focusing on this is what happens and this is how they're limited. And like basically the whole movie's conflict, at least from John Anderson's perspective, exists because of the idea of a Minority Report, the idea that maybe it is a fallible system and we need to explore that.
Yeah, and then the third law is expand on what you have before adding something new. And then the 0th law is always err on the side of that which is awesome, and which is why I enjoyed that scene where John's like going through the mall with Agatha, and she's like, "Grab that umbrella, hide behind these balloons," and then she stops that lady and says, "Don't go home, he knows."
All right, so that was something that they didn't need to add to the movie, but I'm really glad that they did. Like they took 5 seconds away from the runtime just to really show what kind of impact future sight could have on a person in general. Because, for us, the audience, and for John, that comment meant nothing. But that person was standing in a crowded mall, completely dumbstruck and frozen in place because it was such an important thing that was happening in her life.
Yeah, don't go home, he knows. It was just like 5 words, and it just floored that lady.
Shattered her entire existence and reality. Yeah.
And I think that's really what they're talking about here. Like, okay, if we had the power to see the future and you knew about it, what would you do? Now, there's if I'm an authoritative person and I'm taking away your agency, that leads down one course of action. But then there's also what if I told you about what I saw in the future, what would you do?
Ooh, that's interesting. So really, we get 2 perspectives from this. We get a systematic, governmental, bureaucratic approach to if we knew the future, what would we do with it? And that is we would try to prevent crime and maximize utility. And then we get the approach of me, the person who can see the future, has agency. How do I use that to enrich and better the world around me? And we only get that. We get that one scene in the mall where she's helping John with like little tips. Yeah, like you said, grab the umbrella, hide behind the balloons, give him money. But then we get that one tiny snippet of just, she didn't have to do this. She went out of her way in a critical situation where she is being pursued to be put back into slavery to grab that woman and say 5 words that changed her life.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like that. That's really at the heart of it. Okay, so we had these precogs that basically were being held against their will and forced to do it the government way. Or we let her be free on the outside, and how does she choose to use her power when she has her own agency for how to use it? And maybe it's not as grandiose, maybe it doesn't affect all of society, but there's so many costs associated with using it that way that are undesirable. There's the corruption, there's the alternate paths that you're avoiding, there's enslaving of people against their will, all those things.
You know what's funny is we're now talking about the core argument in all of the X-Men comics. It's like people with this amazing power, can they be trusted with it, or should they be regulated?
Yep. Yeah. All right. So I would call this a hard magic system, and I say it's pretty good at adhering to Sanderson's laws of, making us understand the rules and sticking to the rules. So I'm giving it an A.
I mean, I've got to give it an A too. It does stick to the rules. And the biggest thing for me is always, do they resolve the plot within the structure and the system that they've created in a satisfying way? And they did. Like they like the final climactic closing of the film was John Anderton painting that guy into the corner of, do you tear down everything that you've built, or do you kill me and prove that it's still right? And then you go away forever. Like, you're screwed either way. What do you choose?
Yeah, it's a great climax. So this is one of my all-time favorite films. Where do you stand on the controversy surrounding the ending? Do you think it's all just in John Anderton's mind as he's in suspended animation with the halo on, or is this actually what became? I
mean, so I never took it that way, honestly. Like, I always felt like what I'm in the movie sense, like what I'm seeing is what I get. But looking back at it, and now you bring it up, it does kind of strike as the Wayne's World mega happy ending, where like the bad guy gets his comeuppance, John Anderton somehow gets off with all of the crimes that he's committed, and like gets back together with his wife in his crappy concrete apartment. I don't know. It just feels like everything worked out, and it does kind of feel like that. It feels like the Total Recall ending without the extra nod to like actually acknowledging it. Like, oh crap, what if this is all fake?
Yeah. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our analysis of the plot, technology, and magic system of Minority Report. As we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of this excellent film by Steven Spielberg starring Tom Cruise, I think it's worth a rewatch if you haven't.
If you have never seen it, I would recommend watching it. If you have seen it, you've seen it. You're not missing anything. That's what I'm going to say.
All right. Well, if you enjoy listening to the Bad and Magic podcast and you want to join in on the discussion, maybe have something you want to add about Minority Report, we'll have an open thread on our subreddit, Bad at Magic Reddit/r/Bad at Magic, and you can join in the discussion there. I'll put up all the links that I mentioned on the show notes on our website and in the podcast in your favorite player. And as always, I'll put up some photos and engaging things on our Facebook page.
We now have 3 tiers. If you really like what we do, share us with a friend. Just mention us to people that you like. Obviously, if you enjoy what we're doing, maybe your friends would enjoy it too. Next, if you really like what we're doing, you really like it, pull out your phone right now and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast player of choice. You would be shocked at the kind of visibility we can get from just you clicking your thumb on your phone one time. And if you can't get enough of us and you want to ensure that this continues forever and you just hear my voice until I die, then consider becoming a patron on our Patreon. If you do, we do give random giveaways occasionally, and right now I think we do still have a backlog of some special gifts for people that sign up.
You can still get one of our Bad at Magic challenge coins.
Yeah, so they're still out there. If you want to sign up and get one, now's the time.